Pre-season testing day 1 has just finished and we're here to fill you in on the latest news. Max Verstappen, the reigning Formula 1 world champion, topped the first day of 2024 pre-season testing in Bahrain in stylish fashion for his Red Bull team. And whilst some tried to take the top 1 spot, Verstappen was there to react to their times within literal minutes. Are we in for another season of domination? The top 10 consisted of Verstappen, Norris, Sainz, Ricciardo, Gasly, Stroll, Leclerc, Alonso, Piastri, and Zhou, with only Mercedes, Williams and Haas missing out on a spot in the top 10. Sargent was responsible for the day's most serious incident, spinning at high speed through the fast turn 9 before entering the hazardous turn 10 left-hander. Aside from Sargent's spin and a moment caught by Alpine's Esteban Ocon in the morning, it was a very clean day. Albeit there were plenty of lockups through turns 8 and 10, with Norris and Stroll guilty for a couple of large ones. That sums up the top of the timetable in a fast fashion. Some position may surprise you, but what was more surprising were the cars, as we could finally take a good look at the real cars we'll be seeing next week during the first race. So, let's dive into the details of some of the most interesting cars on track. First up, the Red Bull RB20. Red Bull's unconventional handling of the radiator intake and side pod undercut on its 2024 Formula 1 car first seemed to be a second vertical rad inlet beneath the traditional horizontal one. However, this was impossible to confirm based on the car launch photographs. This apparent new direction generated quite a commotion, and many people began to label it as a replica of Mercedes' Zero sidepod design, although it is far from that. Red Bull is one of F1's most secretive teams, and it is doing everything it can to hide from prying eyes. But some clear photos were taken during the first day of pre-season, and as the Red Bull RB20 entered the track in Bahrain this morning, demonstrating the real-world solutions selected for F1 2024, we could finally see what the rivals are up against this season. The RB20 has a redesigned sidepod and cooling inlet design. The Milton Keynes team chose to take certain, failed Mercedes concepts and push them to the limit. Another factor is that they opted to divide the cooling intake into 3 smaller inlets to boost efficiency and maybe close or open some of these slits depending on the weather during the various race weekends. The RB20's cooling inlet arrangement differs from that of the RB19. It has done so using 3 distinct sources. The first is a shark overbite-shaped entrance located beneath the lengthy tray in the upper section. This intake is very tiny and hidden under the lengthy profile to take advantage of the flows that lap the bottom section of the profile and use them to cool the components. The second cooling intake is vertical, placed on the chassis sidewalls and already mentioned during the presentation, and is inspired by the SF23's bypass duct. Furthermore, the last intake is located behind the driver, near the square-shaped halo, and corresponds to the entry of the 2 gullies that push air towards the rear beam wing. This one was a big shock for the grid, as it is something we haven't seen yet during the regulation era. This subdivision of the inlets, however, is generally smaller than the RB19, since the technical team led by Adrian Newey chose to extend the airbox, which is now bigger and rounder in shape. This demonstrates that they have placed additional radiating masses in the upper section of the engine cover, necessitating increased cooling. It is particularly telling that Red Bull chose to send these already radical technologies to Bahrain, in hot temperatures, to evaluate their cooling efficacy. It's safe to say that the RB20 is a broad extension of the successful RB19. However, there are a few key distinctions as we've just mentioned. This has left many wondering why. Well, Adrian Newey revealed to Auto, Motor and Sport why Red Bull made significant alterations to the RB20 compared to the RB19. We knew everyone would copy our car from last year. If we had only focused on further development, we would have been vulnerable. Next up, we're looking at that upgrade from Mercedes. We've talked about it before and we'll talk about it again because it's such a clever piece of engineering. It's safe to say that Mercedes' unique front wing is one of Formula 1's most talked about 2024 changes so far, and its legality has obviously been called into doubt. But now we could see it for real. The team trimmed a portion of the W15's front wing in an effort to create smoother airflow over the car, a configuration that raised eyebrows again once Bahrain testing began. The regulations stipulate that when front wing parts come together, they must be between 5mm and 15mm apart, and the rearmost section of each element except the one furthest back must not be visible when viewed from above. It signifies that the front wing parts should seem like steps from above. Mercedes appears to have gotten past these limitations by fastening what looks to be a wire to the rearmost edge of the second flap, extending the third and final flap along the rear edge of the second flap and disguising it. It's a creative approach to reduce the area of the front wing, so lowering drag, while keeping the number of flaps. So, is this legal? When questioned on the first day of Bahrain pre-season testing, team boss Toto Wolff responded as follows. "What's been put on a car is always following an exchange with the FIA all through the process," Wolff said. "It's not such a thing where you have a clever idea and then you bolt it on to test and you think, that could be or couldn't be challenged. That's a long process of dialogue that happens over the winter. I feel we're in an okay place." Wolff is correct in stating that no innovation is simply tacked onto a car without first consulting with the FIA's technical staff, especially for ideas that are near to the borders of the rules. That alone does not prove that it is lawful or immune to the FIA's desire to shut that loophole, given that a slew of features have been judged illegal or their pathways blocked down, even after running on F1 cars throughout testing and race weekends. However, the FIA has made no public indication that Mercedes' front wing would be investigated or that this particular gap will be closed. However, F1 Chief Technical Officer Pat Symonds, who was previously the technical lead at Renault and Williams, described the front wing as a very interesting interpretation and advised that the loophole be closed. Mercedes' 2024 car is an important change from the idea that caused the team so much stress during the first 2 years of this regulation cycle, with a design closer to Red Bull's all-conquering RB19. But, given Red Bull's recent advancements with the RB20, should Mercedes be concerned that Red Bull has shifted away from the idea Mercedes has adopted? The truth is, you don't know. Every team follows their own development direction and is trying to generate lap time in the virtual world, in simulators and in the wind tunnel, Wolff said. And they're going to put that on the car no matter what other teams do. "We have gone back from our zero-pod concept and some of the features because we felt it didn't help the car's performance. And that's why we've gone to something that at first sight looks more conventional from the bodywork, but we believe is a better platform." What are your thoughts on the W15? Could it become a race-winning car, or are you not satisfied? After all, Russell only managed to finish 12th at the end of the day, but this could mainly be due to Mercedes always looking to do some sandbagging during pre-season testing. Lastly, we're going to look at Ferrari, which hasn't had much fuzz around it in recent weeks. Yes, they look a more organised team, but is that enough to win it all? And as F1 enters its third season with ground effect aerodynamic cars, Anthony Davidson believes Ferrari's design philosophy may be a weak link, as Charles Leclerc visibly bounced around the Sakir track in his new SF24. Bouncing, or porpoising, was a major issue in Formula One's first season of the ground effect aerodynamic era, with nearly every car on the grid, with the exception of the Red Bull, suffering from the phenomenon. So much so that the sports executives pushed through rule modifications last season, adjusting the flaws despite worries about the driver's long-term health. Ferrari does not appear to have overcome the issue with its 2024 competitor, the SF24, with Leclerc bouncing on the first morning of pre-season testing. Compared to the Red Bull, the car is bouncing, the former Formula One driver said on F1 TV. That's one thing that Ferrari have never seen to completely get rid of in a car. You see it there, the front just fluttering up and down, those inconsistencies of ride height change sparking away again as it goes over the bumps at turn 1. Just seems like they still haven't fixed that, which I see as a bit of a weak link in their design philosophy at Ferrari. But that's just one issue Ferrari must address. Could fixing one issue make them serious title contenders? So, what are your thoughts after day 1 of pre-season testing? Do you see any of the teams challenging Red Bull anytime soon? Max seemed to be on another planet again, just doing his job and when needed pushing out a monster lap time. Could anyone come close to that? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell to make sure you receive the latest news on pre-season testing tomorrow, straight to your inbox.